What comes to mind when you see someone walking around downtown dragging a suitcase behind them? To me, my first thought is that person is homeless. Or I might say, is that person homeless? And so why do I go to that position of making that assumption? Sometimes it's because of what they're wearing. Perhaps it's inappropriate for the season or for the time of day. Sometimes it's because they're down by the river and near the bus station. Sometimes it's because of a look on their face, maybe a look that looks sad. Sometimes it's the condition of the luggage that they're pulling behind them. Regardless of those reasons, it makes me wonder, what are the conditions that brought them to this particular place, this particular time, and this particular situation? I make my assumptions based on my experience of working down by the river for a number of years and also living fairly near the river. I spent a lot of time walking on the bike path, riding my bike in the area of the river, visiting with friends at coffee shops along the river. And what I see down there are lots and lots of people who are currently homeless. They are near the bus station. They're accessing the services that the local charities provide in the community, down in the vicinity of the river. Many of them currently shelter along the river and in the parks. And there are stories on the news and in social media all the time about homeless people living around the river and the issues that are presented to us as a result of that. So these stories all inform my assumptions about what I see when I'm down there and by the river and encounter some of these folks. People become homeless for a variety of reasons. They become homeless because of our lack of affordable housing in our community. They become homeless because of insufficient income that forces them to make a choice between paying rent or buying groceries for the kids. Or perhaps they've had a health situation that has required them to miss work and therefore miss income, and they can't pay the rent, and thus they risk eviction. They may also be escaping domestic violence situations and have to be homeless just in order to be safe. And then, as Suzanne told us, there are so many reasons for mental health reasons that people are homeless. They just can't function within community. In 2012, right after the economic crisis, Washoe County School District reported over 3,000 homeless students. And homeless meaning that they didn't have stable environments to live in. And so what happens when students are homeless? They're unstable and they become vulnerable. They may or may not be able to remain in school and keep up with their studies. And when they can't keep up with their studies, they run the risk of dropping out of school. And when they drop out of school, it affects their future employment opportunities and possibilities. Kids are victimized when they're out on the streets on their own, and many of them turn to drugs as a method of coping with what they're facing and what they're struggling with. It's all very sad. Homeless people, though, are not weak. They are tough. I couldn't have done what Angelo did of going out for a week on the street. How many of you think maybe you could do that and survive? I couldn't make it. When we label people as homeless, we depersonalize them. We categorize them and we depersonalize them, and we are then give ourselves permission to stop seeing them as individuals. And when we stop seeing them as individuals, then we feel like we don't have to deal with them anymore. It's easy to push them off to the side and forget about them. Few people want to be homeless or intend to be homeless for any length of time. Many people cycle through periods of homelessness for a variety of reasons, many of which I've already mentioned: the job insecurity, relationship insecurity, health reasons, and, granted, poor choices. Homelessness isn't by default a permanent condition. People who are living in insecure environments want exactly what you and I want. They want safety. They want security. They want to know they have a stable place to stay, that they have food on their table, that they can be clean, that people will look them in the eye, that they can expect to be respected and have resources. They want to have choices. Homelessness doesn't necessarily mean they are living along the river. Sometimes they're living in what's called a doubled up situation, where they have decided to pool resources with a homeless family, another homeless family, and perhaps they have pooled those resources and rented a motel for a week or more, or maybe just a night, depending on how much they have. Sometimes they're couch surfing, where they're spending 2 or 3 nights in people's couches, moving around constantly with no stability. Sometimes they move in with relatives because that's the best resource and opportunity they have. But in any of these situations, it's not the desirable living circumstance that they want. And it's not a permanent situation by any stretch of the imagination. And it comes with stressors and judgments that they don't want in their lives. They aren't necessarily safe environments either for the families, the women, the children. It's a scary situation, and it's unstable, and it causes more problems for them. When we see the currently homeless as individuals, then we can start to see them through God's eyes. We can start to see them as created in His image and people that He loves. We can start thinking, how can we be Jesus' hands and feet for these people and engage with them in a safe and appropriate manner? But how do we begin to engage? My first suggestion is to look around in our own congregations, in our own churches. We have people in our churches who are homeless or who are at risk of being homeless. There was a situation, I was in a Bible study a couple of years ago, and there were several women sitting around the table studying, and we all looked pretty much the same. And then one woman started telling her story. She said that she and her husband were both disabled, and that they survived. They paid their rent, they paid their utilities, and they bought their food by pooling their disability checks every month. And they were getting along, they were managing. But then her husband left to go live with another woman. And she was by herself, now with one disability check. She couldn't afford the rent anymore. She couldn't afford the utilities. She couldn't afford to feed herself. She was living in her car. We didn't know that. And then there's the man that I see every Sunday morning when I go to church. He's sitting in the back pew. He's very quiet. He's always there early. He's got his cup of coffee and he looks meditative. Some days he's very scraggly, and some days he's clean shaven and he looks freshly clothed. And I say hi to him, but I don't think much about him. And then one day I was walking down along the river and I saw a man pushing a cart. And it was that man that was sitting on the back row at my church. And I realized that he is a homeless individual that's really easy to depersonalize and categorize and put aside. Who's investing in his story? Who's helping him for his future? And so we, in Hope, can start to look at people as individuals. We can engage with local community charities and our own church's homeless outreach programs and start getting to know individuals and hearing their stories and then seeing where we can plug in and where we can help. We can be Jesus' hands and feet by investing individually in people, in individuals, just like Bob has told us, like many times the stories that we've heard tonight. So this is what I challenge you to do, is start figuring out, looking people in the eye, saying hello to them, and then praying, where, God, how can I help? And how can I plug in? Thank you.